Hello everyone. So today I'm out here on my deck and we're going to talk about this new helmet that I bought. This is the Schuberth C3 Pro helmet. It's a modular helmet that I purchased to replace this one over here, and that's my Shoei Neotech 1 helmet. This helmet's about 7 years old now, so it's time to think about replacing it. Now, since I purchased this helmet, Shoei has of course come out with the Neotech 2 and now the Neotech 3. From what I read on the Neotech 2, there wasn't that much as far as improvements over my issues that I had with this helmet, so I decided to forego that. Now also, Shoei decided to hook up with Sena Communications, and they stuck that little mount on the side of the helmet. That made it more difficult if you're a CURTOSEY user, so I just didn't like that, so I shied away from the Neotech 2. Now, of course, they have the Neotech 3, which, again, they've gone away from putting that Sena mount on the side of the helmet, made it a little easier for we CURTOSEY users. And also, they have made some improvements from what I've read as far as the weight of this helmet and the quietness of the helmet, which are the two main complaints that I had with it. This is quite a heavy helmet, and it got bad on my neck right after, a long day in the saddle. And also, it is a quite noisy helmet. I mean, I can't ride this helmet without earplugs. It's just way too noisy for me, especially out on the interstate. But honestly, Shoei helmets have always worked really well for me. They fit my head really well. They're always extremely comfortable. And this one was comfortable. All the mechanisms on it worked great. The airflow in it was okay, but again, not, top notch on like some of their other helmets, like my RF 1200 has really good ventilation. But this one, I said it was just okay. The main thing was that weight and the noise on it. Now, I would have looked at the Neotech 3, except rather than being a $600 helmet that this one was, they now want $900 here in the United States. And honestly, I just couldn't justify that on a helmet. I had no idea whether it was going to work for me or not. And that's where this Schuberth C3 Pro comes in. So I did quite a bit of research, and I found out that the Schuberth C3 Pro was known for being a lighter modular helmet and also being one of the more quieter modular helmets out there. If you take a look at these two helmets here, the Shoei and the Schuberth, you notice that this shell is substantially smaller than this one, right? The Schuberth is about a pound lighter than the Shoei. Now, also riding this helmet, I have found that it is substantially quieter as well. I'm able to actually get out on the highway without any earplugs, and while I can of course still hear the wind, it is tolerable. On the back roads, this helmet is pretty nice and quiet, rivaling my Shoei RF 1200. Now, I typically wear a large helmet, right? And that's what both of these helmets that you see here are. Right, the Shoei is a large, as well as the Schuberth being the large size. I have a 58-59 centimeter head circumference, which is what is listed as being the size of a large, 59 centimeters. So again, that's the one I purchased. However, when I got it, I found out that it felt a little tight for me, and particularly in the cheeks here, as well as across the back of my neck. As you notice, it is a substantially smaller shell, right? So I guess I was a little bit surprised, though, about the tightness of the helmet. So I started questioning whether this was going to be the right size for me, and maybe that I needed an extra large. But I didn't want to order another extra large from Revzilla, where I purchased this helmet, and, then have to send one back and all that stuff. So luckily for me, there's a Cycle Gear down in Rhode Island that I called up, asked them if they had an extra large in stock. They did, and they let me come down, try the extra large on, and bring my large in there, and I had them help me size it a little bit. Now, when I tried that extra large shell on, well, it felt a little big for me. It was a little loose on my head, right? Well, this one was a little too tight, that one was a little too loose. So I had a decision basically to make. Knowing this was a brand new helmet and that being tight isn't unexpected, right? That it would break in, the pads would compress and so forth. Do I keep this, right? And again, let it compress, let it work in size to my head better? Or do I send it back? Now, of course, I could have got that extra large helmet and tried to find some pads to take up that little bit of slack that was in the helmet. But I decided to go ahead and go with this large size and see if I could get it to break in. I knew that that was going to potentially be an expensive experiment because this helmet, while not as expensive as the Shoei, it still runs about $520 for the solid color that I got in white. So coming back from Cycle Gear, I decided very shortly after that to go out and take a long ride in this helmet and see how it felt. And it was tight. Again, across the back of my neck in particular, it got a little tight and sore by the end of a couple 100-mile ride. I was good up until probably the last hour of the ride, but after that my neck was bothering me a little bit. But I decided, well, I've already worn it. I own this helmet by then, so let's try it again. So I went out for a couple other rides, and each time I used it, it did start to loosen up and feel better for me. Now, whether that was me just getting used to it or the helmet and the pads forming to my head, compressing, right? I don't know, probably a combination of the two, but after a while the helmet did start to feel more comfortable to me. So I decided to take it on a longer trip. I went out for 9 days, about 2,000 miles on this trip, down to Virginia and back, and I took this as my sole helmet. Now, after the first day of this 9-day trip, I was a little bit concerned about this helmet because about halfway through the day, my neck really started bothering me. Now, the one thing that I was doing differently than I had on my previous rides is I had my earplugs in. I had planned on using earplugs my entire trip. But the next morning, after having said my neck bothering me so much, I took those earplugs out as an experiment and I just wore the helmet again without them. And I found that that made a huge difference for me. The helmet suddenly became a lot more comfortable. Now, exactly why, I'm not sure. Maybe the pressure of the earplugs in my ears, plus the extra tightness of the helmet, combined to not allow me to relax my neck, maybe my jaw muscles and so forth. But taking those earplugs out, then I felt a lot better. So for the remainder of the trip, I did not use my earplugs. And again, the helmet was much more comfortable. I really did not have any problem with comfort for the rest of the trip. And also I found that I really didn't need earplugs. I was on the back roads, and if I usually ride with the shield up, so I had the shield flipped up and everything was nice and calm and quiet enough for me. It really didn't bother me at all. So again, if you're having trouble like that and you have earplugs in, maybe try taking them out. So it was kind of a weird thing I've never experienced before, but just the combination of the extra tightness maybe across the back of this helmet and those earplugs just was a little bit too much for me. Now, as far as ventilation goes on this helmet, there is a chin vent right here that's operated like so. And then there is a top vent as well that allows air to come in over the top of your head. Now, honestly, I have not found this to be a very effective system at all. I could not really feel any ventilation in this helmet whatsoever, and I didn't really notice much between the closed position and the open position. So that I'm not impressed with. I've had many other helmets, again, with much better ventilation than this. Now, I have read online that some people have had trouble with the visor staying open while riding. Now, of course, this is a new helmet, but I did not experience that at all. I rode with my visor open most of the time, and again, it stayed up very nicely for me. So again, not really a problem. Now, here's a couple of things I do not like about this Schuberth C3 Pro. One is the mechanism for opening and closing the modular lid. Right? It's underneath here, this red button, but I don't find that it always works very well, especially with a gloved hand. You really have to get in there with your finger and push it pretty hard, right? So sometimes it just takes a couple of tries to do it. Now also closing it, right, it really has a positive lock and click. So you can bring this down and close it, and if you don't hear that click like that, right, then the helmet isn't going to be closed. And there's two latches on both sides, so you got to make sure you get both of those latches locked. All right, see, like that first, that isn't really locked. That second one, then it's locked. So you need to get used to that, and you really got to get in the habit of pulling that that chin bar of the helmet down pretty securely. Another thing that I don't really care for is this mechanism for securing the helmet, right? Normally I'm used to, you know, the D-rings, double D-rings. They work extremely well, and I'm used to fastening them. This has more of a ratchet kind of mechanism here, and so you put this in here, and see, that's the problem, is sometimes it doesn't go in right. So there we go, got it in, and then it's easy, just pull this and then it comes out. But sometimes when you're fumbling around, that's kind of tough to get in there. Also, it's kind of bulky up underneath my chin anyway. Now maybe I have a big Adam's apple or something like that, but I find that it bothers me a little bit. It's not as comfortable as that showy helmet over there. And there's a lot of this pad in here that overlaps, and so it can stick out and get up underneath there, so you have to make sure that that all gets situated right every time you put the helmet on. I got used to it, but again, that's a lot of stuff underneath there, and this mechanism seems to be situated back a little bit underneath my chin, so again, it wasn't quite as comfortable, right? I could feel it all of the time. So again, that's something I'm not really happy about. Now, as far as safety goes, this Schuberth C3 Pro helmet does meet DOT specifications here in the United States, and of course the European standards as well. It does not have Snell approval. Snell typically does not approve modular helmets. So this is about as safe as you're going to find in a modular helmet. So, all right, let's sum this all up about this Schuberth C3 Pro helmet. Things I like about it. It is definitely lighter, and it is a quieter modular helmet than something like the showy Neotech 1 that I have over there. Things I do not like about it, however, are that the ventilation, to me, isn't that great. The sizing on this is a little bit tight. Again, I have a 59 centimeter head. That's what this helmet is rated at, and it's a little bit tight for me. It's gotten much better, and it's tolerable as I'm, now been using it for a while, right? But again, the helmet still does fit a little bit tighter than other large helmets that I have purchased in the past. Also, I do not really care for their latching mechanism and this mechanism for underneath the chin. Again, can be a little bit cumbersome to get to, especially with a gloved hand. So adding all of that stuff up together, if you ask me if I would purchase this helmet again, the answer would be no. There are too many little drawbacks that make it not a very easy helmet to use or a comfortable helmet to use. I'm getting used to the tightness. It is getting, worked in, right? But still, I'm going on a long trip here in a couple of weeks, and am I going to take this with me? No, I'm not. I'm going to go take one of my other showy helmets. It won't be a modular helmet, right? I'm probably going to take my Hornet X2 helmet with me on that trip, even though there are some issues with that, but overall it's a much more comfortable helmet, and I know that it's going to work for me and not, again, give me problems along the way. This one, I can't really say that. Now, I'm going to keep this helmet because I've already worn it, I've already purchased it, I spent a good amount of money on it. So we'll use it for shorter rides, you know, around the area and things like that. And maybe eventually it will break in enough for me to feel good about taking it on a really long trip. But at this point, that's just not the case.